And good afternoon for this second session, breakout session for the afternoon. I know for all of those who are still a bit jet lagged, this is the worst time of the day, the middle of the afternoon. So we'll try to have a very interactive session this afternoon so that you can keep you awake. So intervention will be fairly short with very small number of slides or 0 slides at all for some of our speakers, and mostly interaction and dialogue with you, because we want actually to get your feedback and your ideas on what is a potentially challenging but very important topic. This session is about institutional and policy frameworks for increasing research infrastructure collaboration. I think we have heard quite a lot today and yesterday that there are increasing synergies, collaboration, networks between research infrastructures. And the objectives of this collaboration, of these links that are being set up, are actually quite diverse. In some cases, this is just between similar infrastructure to sort of exchange good practices, become more visible to your funders and decision makers, improve user access. In some cases, it might be more interdisciplinary because you want to address between different infrastructure common complex challenges, and no single infrastructure can provide all the instruments or the data which are required for the users. In some cases, it's because you need to collect the data globally or regionally, and you cannot do that at the national level, so you need to develop networks of similar type of, or diverse type of instrumentations that collect the data. In some cases, it's because you want to have a regional development and you think that by getting together as a network, then you can be more attractive to innovations, to policymakers, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we've heard, this morning, sort of this global collaboration regarding instrumentations for imagery, where the goal is actually to have training, to have a network of facilities that can together provide more incentive for training, more incentive for career development, etc. So the goals of those synergies can be very diverse, but there is some commonalities in all these networks. They have to face a number of challenges. Because when you start to work between infrastructures that may have, sort of have a different context because they are in different countries, they have different funding mechanisms, so on different timelines, they have different governance, they have different expectations, different user base, and you bring them together, then you have to think about different type of organizations, different type of models, so that they can work together and be effective. So this is what we are going to start discussing this afternoon. We could take a few hours, but unfortunately we have only 45, 50 minutes. So without further ado, we'll get started with our first speaker. It's slightly different from the original order because we have thought about that between us. We'll start with Yeleni Amaral d'Acunha. She's a coordinator of negotiation advice and international studies at the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development, CNPq, in Brazil. She has a lot of experience as a science policy maker. I'm not going to say more because we want to get the talk. Important, this first presentation is about a strategic vision. How do you develop a regional strategy for research infrastructure between countries that before that were not necessarily used to work together? Yeleni. Just.
Okay. Oh, hi. Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Frédéric. My colleagues from the panel, Roland and Urasha. Well, my job here this afternoon is to talk about a strategy following a very good example in Europe. So I'm from Latin America, and this conversation, this dialogue inside the EULAC cooperation on research infrastructure is not new, but it has escalated a lot, especially after the pandemics. And what we did to escalate that, what we did to have political support on that. So we have to talk about a little bit about the background of that. In the 2017, European Union supported us with the creation of the so-called EULAC Working Group on Research Infrastructure. And within this group, we have worked a lot. For instance, we have developed many roadmaps, mappings of infrastructure in LAC region. We have promoted policy dialogues. We have promoted interchanging of policies and good practices and many other things. Together with the working group, we also have to support our initiative, the CSA, also supported by the European Union, called Resimpro Plus. So what we did, we took all the work that we were doing together and took a very good example in Europe, what is ICRI, and gather all the work together in this strategy that I'm going to present to you. So the strategy is the Latin American and Caribbean Forum on Research Infrastructure. It's very new, it started this year, but we have already a board, a governance under this. So we have a coordination body and it's advisory board. This advisory board is formed by some delegates from ICRI. And also inside this governance, we have the 5 hubs. So we have a hub for biodiversity and climate change. We have a hub for health, for emerging technology, for energy, and also for food security. Why dividing the work into hubs and into thematic areas? It's another thing that it's not new. Since the creation of the working group, we are talking about how to work into thematic areas. So as you know, we are taking an example of Europe that is a bloc that has a strong coordination and has, although it does not deal with fundings, it influences it a lot. So we are hoping in the future we'll do the same. In our case, we have many LAC countries, we have many political instability, we have, although we have similarities like cultural similarities, we do differ hugely in terms of research and innovation, in terms, for instance, of how to communicate, of how to understand even the concept of research infrastructure. And put everything together inside a coordinated initiative, it's very hard. And that's why I'm here, to listen to you, to get your advices on that. And also, we do have our meetings. We had 1 or 2 meetings with the advisory board since the beginning. This advisory board has at least 4 ICRI delegates. So we are very, very supported by them and listen to them, but also in this very international forum, listen to you. It's a very good to keep following in this strategy and in this way. So thank you. I do not have much to say. It's a very new initiative that just started at the beginning of this year. Thank you.
You can stay. Jenny, just yeah. So this is really interesting because this is the development of a regional strategy. Coming from scratch, really, though there have been some preliminary work. And here this is, you have to think, how can you develop a common strategy for countries that until now had their own national objectives, their own national strategies. Now going one step further, the second speaker is Dr. Uracha Roktanonchai. I hope I not pronouncing that too badly. Uracha is the Executive Director of the National Nanotechnology Center, Nanotech, at the Thailand National Science and Technology Development Agency. She is an honorary professor at the University of Queensland, so not too far. And she's, most importantly for this presentation, she's the chair of the ASEAN Regional Research Infrastructure Strategy Task Force, where the goal is to emphasize the importance of sharing research infrastructure within ASEAN countries and initiate dialogue within the other regions. Uracha, please. Can you put the slide, or you just have to press green?
No.
No.
Afternoon tea.
No, that's not it.
So we're back. Otherwise, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Good afternoon. Thank you, Frédéric, for the introduction. And so it's my pleasure to introduce ASEAN and our activities today. And if you are not aware about ASEAN, ASEAN is actually the Association of Southeast Asia nations, and commonly known as, has been established since 1967. And this is a regional organization that comprises 10 member states: Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. The mission of ASEAN is to promote political and economical stability, as well as to sustain cultural exchange and also the social progress. And in case you may not be aware, according to statistics, is that the total GDP of ASEAN nations reached 3.6 trillion US dollar back in 2022. And it is expected that this can reach to 4.5 trillion US in 2030. So this can be ranked as the 5th largest economy in the world. So in recent years, ASEAN has put a very strong effort and recognized in terms of the critical roles of science, technology, and innovation. And we believe that this can be used to foster economic growth as well as enhancing the competitiveness. So as far as this regards, the first initiative that ASEAN has done in terms of S&3 and also research infrastructure is that we implemented the ASEAN Regional Research Landscape, or in short we call RI Landscape Study. And with this study, we actually aim to map existing research infrastructure available in 10 countries and also identify gaps and opportunities that we can collaborate within these regions. With the support from the EU delegates and also ICRI, ASEAN Task Force has been implemented with 2 EU experts and also 1 ASEAN expert. We done quite various methodology in terms to the study. For example, research on paper, literature reviews, and also focusing on in terms of available research infrastructures and also policy makers. We interview a lot with key stakeholders, including researchers, policy makers, and also managers of these research infrastructures. And also there are visiting surveys with the actual research infrastructure within this region. Since the start in 2002 to 2003 of this ASEAN landscape, the work has been completed, and now we are in the ongoing stage of working on the strategy. And they are actually one of the critical guidelines for the ASEAN members and ASEAN scientists to work together. This ASEAN RI strategy will cover mostly 4 important areas. One is the implementation groups. Second, technology transfer. Third, the regional and inter-regional collaboration. And of course, the fourth one, the talent pool and also capacity buildings. We are in the stage of the work that finalizing the strategy, and we expect to get it endorsed with the ASEAN Committee on Science, Technology and Innovation, or in short we call COSTI, by mid of next year. And after that, we also expect to propose that this strategy can be proposed with the ASEAN Plan of Action for Science, Technology or Innovation, or in short we call it APASTI, later on. So this can be put into the real implementation. One of the key highlights or message I would like to convey to you all is that within the discussion of the ASEAN and also the strategy that's now being built, we are confirmed that integration of the ASEAN regions are very important. And this is because of we already have the existing governance structure within ASEAN that is at the ministry level called COSTI. And this can be used as a top level to support whatever strategy that we want to propose. The second thing is that what we want to do within our ASEAN region is that the inclusive approach, where all countries should work together, utilize the equipment or infrastructure that we have together, because we are neighborhood and also we share some common culture. And also the third important thing is that in terms of talents, that people are very important, and how to build human resources, how to build workforce with a strong expertise to use this infrastructure. So we play quite strong emphasis in this point. Another thing is we want our region to be ready. What does that mean is that ready within the region so we can outreach for collaboration within other regions. For example, that I have learned during the past 2 years that there are so many mechanisms out here for training and also for collaboration with different aspects in terms of research problems and also challenges of the global. So we want that by these approaches, we can work collaboratively within the region and also with inter-cooperation with other regions too. So if you are interested more about ASEAN, we have a site event tomorrow. So please join in. It will be at the same time here at 2 o'clock at the Great Room 1. So please join in if you are interested. And I would like to thank you, the CSIO and also EU ICRI for the help throughout with this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it was quite interesting to see the similarities and the difference between the two approaches. In this case, Uracha was presented that the starting point was that there was an existing community, the ASEAN community, where government were already discussing about a number of issues. And when science and technology, came at the top of the list as a priority, then research infrastructure, which is a key element of the development of research and technology, become very important. And ASEAN created the group to discuss how they could collaborate further within research infrastructure. And I'm sure we'll have further questions to see how this works, on practical case. The third presenters, I'm not sure we need to introduce him again because he's one of the stars of this meeting. It's Roland Roberts. Roland is, I've lost my note here, he's a Deputy Chief Officer for Research Facilities at the NSF. He's been involved in a lot of environmental research previously, not going to go in further details. And he's going to present an existing collaboration at the global level between different types of research infrastructure. So here we are one step further, an actual model of existing collaboration between different types of infrastructure at the global level with all the challenges that infers. Roland.
Thank you, Frédéric. I don't know if that's the reputation I want to have or not. But thank you so much. I am going to try to add to what my colleagues have mentioned using an example that have been in existence for a few years now, the Global Environmental Research Infrastructure, GERI, and talk a little bit about successes and challenges with international collaboration around environmental sciences. So, as we all know, successful international collaboration among RIs must overcome significant challenges, hurdles. Among them are some of the things that my colleagues have already mentioned, differences in research culture, policy, governance, data management practices, research and national security concerns, and numerous others we can list. Our recent experience with COVID-19 has demonstrated that it is critical to address these challenges. We have to overcome these barriers to global collaborations towards a common goal. To strengthen global collaborations, research infrastructure managers and funders must be creative in identifying solutions to these challenges. To allow collaborations to form both intentionally and organically as need arise, RIs must be afforded the agility to, including necessary resources to explore and pursue these opportunities. So in 2004, around there, the US National Academies of Sciences and Engineering and Medicine published a study that recognized the global scale of the challenges with which we are faced and the need for the solutions to be informed by global research approaches. GERI provides the global perspective and platform to address globally relevant environmental issues. Just earlier today, I was mentioning to a colleague that, species do not recognize political boundaries. We have to deal with the issues of species loss, species response to climate change, land use change over time, invasive species spread, among the multiple of problems that we are faced with in the environmental sciences. No part of the globe is immune to these challenges. Thus, connections across RIs globally will help us to identify the problems and to forge collaborations and efforts to arrive at effective solutions. So GERI specifically involves collaborations globally, NEON in the USA, funded by NSF, SEON, South Africa, TURN here in Australia, ICOS in Europe, ELTER, and CERN. All of these are involved in the GERI collaboration. In 2020, an MOU was signed among these organizations. The MOU articulates the terms and conditions of the GERI collaboration and has addressed most of the challenges that I mentioned earlier. Synergies across these environmental RIs, as enabled by GERI, leverages the outcome of these individual investments. So the collaboration, they seek to go beyond what the individual RIs were funded to achieve. Along with opportunities to catalyze these globally relevant research, GERI provides a forum for discussion of issues related to data, its security, life cycle management, standards, and interoperability, and innovative approaches to training and preparing the next generation of data users and global thinkers. ICRI also provides a diverse framework of approaches from which developing environmental research infrastructures, such as the Korean National Institute of Ecology, can benefit from the lessons learned from the ICRI participants. However, and this is a big however, the challenge that ICRI faces, and I know that the participants in this collaborative would be happy that I recognize this, is funding. Funding to which the sustainability of the initiative is tightly coupled and continues to be a critical challenge. Funding also has implications for the success of ICRI and its ability to gather and integrate the data from its diverse array of international partners. ICRI can be instrumental in consolidating global thinking and approaches, helping us to overcome current constraints and consolidation of efforts around solutions that are indeed global. However, this makes it even more critical for us to sustain the efforts of ICRI and find ways to think differently about how we fund these global initiatives. Coming from a funding agency, I know that some would cringe when I say this, but we cannot afford to give unfunded mandates. If we expect global collaborations, if we expect research infrastructures to aggregate to address these global challenges, we need to make sure that we have some type of funding model, some change in how we do business that allows the infrastructures to do what we expect them to do. With this, I end and would welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Roland, for getting straight into the difficulties and the challenges and saying I'm sure funding will be coming back. I'm going to just ask one question to each of the panel members, and then I'll give you the floor, okay? So my first question is to Gilini. You've mentioned, this initiative to develop a strategy at the South American and Latin American level. Was that a bottom-up process or a top-down process? Was it the communities that said we have to come together because there are some added value and we need to pool resources or develop common strategies? Or was this a demand from government saying, okay, you got to get your act together because we can't go on each of us in its own direction and we need to collaborate?
Yeah. Well, it's a very good question, and especially because our initiative is a very bottom-up one. With LAC-FREE, we intend to serve as a guideline for the research, for the collaboration on research infrastructure. Also to provide a space for the dialogue with different stakeholders in a coordinate way involving the 5 topics that we chose. And our strategy, as we do not start it as a top-down initiative, our strategy is to gather the roadmaps in each hub and give them to the coordination team that will work with the working group on research infrastructure that is supported by the GIRI-SON from European Union, and try to use what we have, like the South collaborations, other mechanisms we have, like the CITED partnership, and things like that, to make a voice, to show to them the importance of our initiative. That's what we can do for the moment, because we do not have a top-down Although we have the political support from European Union, we do not have top-down support from the countries, from the LAC countries.
Thank you. So quite a challenge there. How do you connect the users, the scientific communities, the academic communities, to the decision-making communities so that it works? Uracha, a question for you. You've mentioned that you want, the goal of the ASEAN group is after a landscaping, so you've got sort of a knowledge of what are the infrastructure in the region. You've said that you want to strengthen the collaboration. Can you give us an example of an existing regional research infrastructure sort of collaboration that already exists, and what was the goal for that collaboration? There are several. Yes.
Thank you, Tom. For ASEAN, we actually have the landscape study, as I have mentioned, but at the same time, it has been consortiums or networking within the region already. For example, with the rise or the high demand of the AI and big data, the high computing computer has been formed the consortium within ASEAN, and that is called the ASEAN HPC Task Force, where there have been trainings and also workshops and also seminar within this task force. And also this has been formed between Thailand, between Singapore, Indonesia, and more other ASEAN country, more Asia country to join as well, like Japan and Korea. So these are one of the consortium that has been built up very strongly. And they are not only working within ASEAN, this is one of the good examples that they have outreach to the working with the EU as well by the help with the ICRI. They set up like EU ASEAN HPC Task Force, where they actually doing the capacity building, training for students and also postgraduate students. So these are one of the key activities in terms of building the ecosystem in this region, get the people ready so they can get in and fit in very well with available RI that they have.
Thanks a lot. We might come back on more details on how the consortium work, in practice. But Roland, a question for you. You've mentioned the critical question of the sustainability of this type of global collaboration, international collaborations, saying, in terms of funding, there is no real good funding mechanisms that would support this type of collaboration. But you also mentioned that right now, ICRI is based on the MOU agreement, and not, it's not an international organization with a legal basis, right? So in terms of the organization model, the governance model, do you think that just having an MOU is sustainable enough in the long term, or that if you want to persist and develop further activities, you would need to strengthen the type of organization, the governance model, the legal model for the organization?
Great question. An MOU by itself is just a start to all of this. And, when that MOU was signed, I was very happy that the groups came together. Again, for them, it was a bottom-up effort. It was not something that was dictated by the funding agencies of any of these organizations. However, I think it needs to go beyond that. Maybe a more formal interaction among these organizations that empowers them to, as an organization, not as each individual RIs, but as ICRI, to pursue funding, to sustain themselves. I think that might be the way to go. Or for the lesson here for research infrastructures that are thinking about this is to think about this from the get-go. How would you sustain yourself? What type of funding model do you want to pursue? A lot of these RIs are funded by national governments, etc. But do we need a different type of model where there is funding from government, funding from philanthropical organizations, funding from the private sector, where there would be usually a little bit more flexibility on how funding from maybe the private sector might be used? There are usually lots of strings attached to government funding. But how can we change that model and provide the resources? Because again, I don't think that a strong MOU without the funding, I don't see it as being very useful.
Right, okay, so challenging. What I failed to mention at the beginning is that at the OECD Global Science Forum, we have a current activity on research infrastructure ecosystems, basically saying how do these infrastructure work together, and Ronnie is the chair of our expert group, so we have a vested interest in your responses and your ideas. So let's start by getting a few questions or comments from the audience. Who wants to start? The first one is always the most difficult, but yeah, go on. And if you can say your name and your affiliation, please.
My name is Gonzalo Arenas. I'm from the Ministry of Science from Chile. So I had a question for my Brazilian colleague. I'm a bit puzzled by the top-down, bottom-up, because CNPq is a government organization from Brazil and one of the largest ones in Latin America. So how is it a bottom-up approach if CNPq and other funding agencies from Latin America are participating in this effort?
Yeah.
And what can we do in order to make it more explicitly?
I'm from CNPq, but the strategy LAC-free is not from CNPq. It's from Latin American and many stakeholders together. And CNPq stays just under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, which is the top-down level. So we are bottom-up. So that's why our will is to do the roadmaps inside each hub and give them to the top-level board to be analyzed and a kind of influencing, in an attempt to influence them on that. It's not an easy job. So CNPq is not the high level taking into account my Brazil, my country. Do you understand? It's different, yeah.
Yeah, so there is government and government, right?
And and the strategy that we are trying to follow, which is ICRI, is totally inside the European Union context. So do you know the difference?
Yes, I do not believe I share the difference, but I understand it.
Yeah,
because again, CNPq is the largest government funding agencies from Latin America.
Yeah, I was telling Frédéric before the session that one thing that Latin American people has is the enthusiasm to keep going, to follow, and to work a lot and hard.
Thank you. So next question, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacek Olnowski from the Victor Chang Cardiac Research Institute. But before, I also worked a lot with the young academies in Europe. And so my question and comments are related also to how young academies work. So when I'm listening to the discussion about the collaboration, global or interstate collaboration, one of the models that the young academies have been working on is getting a lot of stakeholders together and chip in small quantities of money to initiate, on the administrative level, the support for those organizations. And I think we all agree, if you put directors of those organizations together, they will never have time to meet and actually do things. But if you just provide a small administrative support for this, the proactive administrative support who can collect and proactively lead the projects, then this can really speed up this interaction. And this usually requires only an initial small chip in from the multiple stakeholders. And then you can start to acquire funding from different, what you, Roland, mentioned, acquire funding from different sources. And on that note, I was wondering, do we have already, because if you want to acquire funding from different sources, you need to build a very tangible value proposition and impact measurement strategies to show what you're bringing to the community. So I wonder if we have that already as the research infrastructure figured out in a way, or maybe we can, other of you do, that we could use to really show the funding agencies, private, public, places, what is the advantage of working together, especially in the work like you do with Jerry. It seems easy to find. Well, it seems easy to convince some philanthropic funding to contribute because it's about the global, plan and so on. But do we have impact frameworks that we can use already to get that sort of funding?
Maybe it's not so easy, but Roland, you want maybe to set, and maybe after Urocha, I think.
Well, I would only say that, well, not only say, but one of the things I want to say that if these collaborations are not proactively budgeted, the funds that you are talking about has to come from somewhere. And when I was a program officer at NSF, if one of my awardees came to me with that proposition, my question would be, what amount of scope are you reducing in the project? Because that money has to, unless you have identified efficiencies somehow, that money is coming from somewhere, right? And what scope are you reducing? What would you not be doing that you had promised to do to allocate money to those activities, right? This is why, I propose that as funding agencies, we need to think differently about that. We need to proactively make sure that funding is provided to do the kinds of things that you are thinking about. So it's a question I asked the folks from NEON when I managed that program, when they came to me and say, oh, there is this collaboration we want to enter into. It's like, where are you getting money to do that? That's the sort of thing. So it's not an easy question. The funders would come asking you where you're getting the money from, what scope you're reducing, and you have to be prepared to answer that question, basically. And I know that's not a satisfying answer, but it's the reality that we are dealing with.
Maybe, Urocha, you want to add something on how your consortium, are working together, and whether you have, thought about the added value of the consortium.
Regarding the problems that we have, the funding is one of the key strategies that we want to focus on as well, because even though the infrastructure has been built up by each government or each countries, but the funding to let people working together, and we need to find the right funding scheme to cover for that. And another thing that we discuss is that all these consortium, not only the HPC, but other like large synchrotron or nuclear, they actually have already consortium. But how can we use this consortium collaboration to tackle global or local challenges? So these are one of the key that how can we utilize the research infrastructure that we have at the most of it. So we, in Southeast Asian, in ASEAN country, we start discussing about another dimension apart from the RI management in terms of like the global challenges, not only global, but can be in our regional challenges. For example, like some common problems like water or air quality or flooding from urbanizations. So these are one of the key that if we tackle this problem with the RI term that we have available in this region.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a good message, together saying there must be a value proposition for the different members to work together that goes beyond what would be the traditional funding to each individual infrastructure. And if you get together to do something, then there must be a value for each stakeholder, for each member in it. I think Inma, yeah.
It's Inmaculada Figueroa from the Ministry of Science and Innovation and Universities in Spain. It's a question for Delane. I would like just to you could give us some key conclusion on the work that you are doing and we are doing together for this collaboration in research infrastructure between Europe and Latin America, and how we can strengthen this collaboration, and what is the role in this collaboration of this political dialogue that we have in which we are working, and how this action, like the projects and the funding seed that we have with the project ULAC Infra is helping in the implementation of this action, and how this collaboration, global collaboration between Europe and Latin America is helping you also to push the activity inside your region, inside Latin America, in order to join efforts and build something like LAC-free as you are promoting.
Yeah. One of our first actions inside the initiative was to gather the synergies from the working group activities and the activities of the HESINFRA CSA HESINFRA project, not only the HESINFRA Plus, that is the project that is going on now, but the old one as well. And so took all the work that was done inside these two arms and take some advantage of all the things that, all the good practices, all the challenges, all the weaknesses, all the opportunities. We did, for instance, inside, as a task inside our HESINFRA project, a SWOT analysis, exactly to identify the weaknesses, the threats, the opportunities, and these things, this work that we do help us a lot to improve the collaboration regionally, between Europe and between LAC countries. Also, the mappings that we did. At the beginning, we didn't know, even inside Latin American, what we did as research infrastructure. I knew mine in Brazil, but my friends from Argentina didn't know what I had. And the opposite was the same. So now inside these activities we did, we have mappings of that. Even some countries, I can mention Brazil, that is one country that I know most, but we also have a platform of research infrastructure established. So all this work helps a lot to improve and to deepen the collaboration. And now with this third arm, which is the LAC-free, which reunites all the work we've done, we intend to reinforce the collaboration and to escalate it a lot. That's our intention. Our intention is to promote a dialogue between our stakeholders, and also talking a little bit about finance. I think one of the strategies is exactly to involve different stakeholders, not only the public sector, but the private sector, the civil society, and all together, thinking together, not only one area, but all the areas, including humanities, include the social areas. I think that's the way you have to think the future, to get money and to get sustainability for our projects. So Ima, I don't know if I answer your questions, but I think this is the way to work together. I heard this yesterday. Science is not done isolated, but in collaboration with everybody. Thank you.
Antje Kepler, I'm chair of ERIC Forum. I would like to come back to the comment that was made here earlier about efficiencies. And also your reply here that if someone comes to you and wants to do an extra work, that you ask where is this being reduced from and how much money it is. I think I disagree a little bit with this view. And looking at the European research infrastructures, 25 out of the 28 are distributed. And they're based on, let's say, on average 1 billion to 1.5 billion euros investment on the ground, on the national ground. But the layer that now comes on top for the coordination to open all these capacities to scientists inside Europe and also beyond is 0.1%, sometimes 0.05% that is needed from public funding. But this cannot also not be delegated towards the industry to say, you take care of the coordination level. And I would really ask the public funders to consider how little is needed these days to really increase and open up what we have already built in the past 2 decades. It's not a lot. And I'm quite passionate about this. So really see this, and it's not a zero-net game. And the scientists work during their weekends, they work at night to make all of this happen. And they're not asking for money to do this.
That's a very strong message, but I think it's important to remember that the integration that exists in Europe is not identical at the global level or within different regions of the world. So there is a sort of a positive advantage in the European Union that there are already existing instruments at regional level to support collaboration between countries that may not exist in other regions, where they have to find the different type of resource instrument that would be able to fund this type of collaboration. So, the challenge may be slightly different. There was a question. Yeah. Oh, you want to respond? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the comment. I wish I could tell you that we have a similar system in the United States. We don't. Right. The projects are funded to operate, and if that activity you are proposing is not included in that operation budget, I love the idea of having that latitude to do that, and I'm hoping that it's a model that we may strive towards, but currently doesn't exist, right? As Frédéric said, it's not global. So we have to be sensitive to that. I love that model, but unfortunately, it's not our reality. But thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paolo Acunzo from Enea, Italy. I would like just to add another model, if you wish, another European model. As you know that in Europe, every 2 years we have a big science business forum, and that is focused for involvement on industrial participation to the research infrastructure. That is a forum that is promoted directly by the big science organization, by research infrastructure such as CERN, ESA, SCA, ESO, and that the way to do that is thinking to give a common place, a one-stop shop, where it's possible to meet industries and research infrastructure according to the call for tenders and procurement rules. I'm just saying that because we are thinking, as Big Science Business Forum, if it's possible to find some way to collaboration also in a global perspective, and if you think that it could be useful also in worldwide to use this kind of approach, independent from the governments, but directly by big science organization, and focused on the industrial participation. Thank you.
Who wants to respond? Watcher, maybe?
I think that would be a good starting point to expose ourselves in the region to others as well. And I think during that the session there will be exposure of each region or each organization, right? Yeah. So that would be one key to kick off. Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the collaboration within the RI as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, yeah, so lady, yeah, just behind you. Yeah, because she was raising her hand from the start, so.
Thanks so very much. Jo Wingender from Elixir Europe. So my question is a little bit related to what was discussed earlier, which is impact. So a phenomenon that we've seen over the last decade, at least in Europe, is that research infrastructures, but organizations in general, are having to demonstrate more and more their value to funders, to justify why are you worth funding. So that's why also impact measurement has become increasingly important. And this is something that is it depends on the organization and the network. But for instance, if you're talking about a physical infrastructure, it's a little easier to measure impact because you can measure the amount of users or publications. But if you're talking about international collaboration amongst research infrastructures and networks, it becomes quite difficult. So I guess in order for us to ensure sustained funding for our infrastructures in the future, and to ensure that there is increased funding for collaborations, I guess my question is, in your networks, in your infrastructures, do you have any experience with this? Do you have any mechanisms that you use to measure impact, not just from your own organization, but with the collaborations that you already have in place.
Very good points. That's something we have been addressing. So, Roland, maybe you want to.
Yeah, a great question, right? One of the things we have found in the Global Science Forum activity that Frédéric mentioned is that impact is the last thing that we think about when we come together to form these collaboratives, whether it is local, regional, or international. It does not change. It's the last thing that is sort of, I think among the RI ecosystems that we have explored, I think it was only maybe one.
Very few.
or very few that even touched or considered impact and how we evaluate impact. And this is one of the reasons why we started looking at the social science and humanities, and it's like, how not only do we bring them into the fold of research infrastructures, but how do we learn from them on how to do this? Because they have traversed this, and some of them know how to do it. They are expert in this area. How do we leverage that expertise from the get-go, from the beginning, as these collaborations begin to come together, begin to develop? How do we involve expertise from the social science and humanities to evaluate that impact, identify what those matrices are, what should we be measuring, and how do we measure that?
I'm very mindful of the time, so we'll take one more question, and then I will give each of our panelists 30 seconds for some conclusion. Yeah.
Hi, Richard Samuels with the Australian Government. I see a lot of policy discussion around frameworks for research infrastructure, focusing on the infrastructure that exists and how do we fund that in a sustainable way, and that's important. I'm interested in the panel's thoughts about the types of research infrastructure that's needed for sectors where we don't have existing infrastructure. So I'm thinking AI, where we might need big data processing centres, or critical minerals, where we're going to need investments in chemical processing facilities. It seems to me like there needs to be an international policy discussion on that type of infrastructure, because I'm concerned that if we don't have that now, that we're not going to be able to set ourselves up to deliver on those new sectoral priorities. Thanks.
That's a good question. Maybe Dieleni, in your sort of strategy, is this looking also forward at what would be the need of the Latin American countries in terms of future infrastructures?
What we really expect with this strategy is to create a regional roadmap that serves as a guideline for research infrastructure collaboration among the REs, among the research infrastructures, in order, of course, to tackle the global challenges. So it's a long pathway we have to follow, as we have to convince the top-down level, but I think according to the advices we already have from the ICRI delegates that are on our advisory board, I think we are getting there. We are in the right path to go there. Maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, in another ICRI event, I will have much good news to tell you all.
Great. Nuracha, maybe a few concluding words?
For our ASEAN region, we're doing similar things, but building the strategy that we're doing at the moment, and later on we're going to do the roadmap and also implementations. But majority of this, we're going to focus in terms of the integration within the consortiums and also within the region, as well as the one that I have mentioned, the inclusive approach, that we will not leave any countries behind, because some countries, they have different readiness levels. So some are ready to to use this RI, but some are not. They don't even have the available RI, so we can use this within the region, make most of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Roland, last few words?
If it's any comfort to you on AI, we have done in the US a lot of investments in AI. The NEAR, and I'm not going to try to remember how to translate the acronym right now, but that's one of the big investments we have made in AI, and they're looking to collaborate sort of nationally and internationally with that effort. But I think my final statement is sort of to encourage sort of continued conversation on this topic globally. Funding models within our individual countries vary. In the US, as you heard yesterday, science is funded, research infrastructure is funded by several agencies across the federal government. They all have their own funding strategies. The challenge comes when maybe one of the ICRI projects with that funding already built into it to foster collaboration is trying to collaborate internationally with another RI where that buffer is not built in. Right? So it is sort of impeding sort of global collaboration, or maybe global collaboration is occurring, but we can improve, we can optimize what is happening if we have serious conversations and try to address some of these problems. I would just encourage us to continue talking about it and exploring solutions, basically.
Thank you very much for these wise words and some homework to do, to discuss with your funding agencies, to think, ahead and saying, okay, collaboration should be embedded into your funding plans. Thanks for our panelists. If you can, round of applause to them, because it was a very fruitful discussion. And now it's time for your coffee. Thank you very much.